nobody can touch you because I represent you. Keep your nose clean, follow the rules, be a good earner, and maybe one day when they open the books, you become a wise guy. I die with you, Donnie.
Welcome back. Thank you for joining us on our journey of investigating the 5 families of NYC. This is the first episode of the series, where we'll be taking a closer look into the Bonanno crime family. Founding members of what would become the Bonanno crime family had emigrated from Sicily to the United States, and the development of their American activities centered in Brooklyn. The Bonanno crime family emerged from the Castellamarese War, a mafia power dispute in the early 1930s that was named for the hometown of many of the participants. The Castellamarese War left as many as 60 mobsters, many of whom were high-ranking, dead. It occurred at a tense time. Half of the mafia members had grown up in the United States and wanted to modernize, and the other half, sometimes derogatorily referred to by the younger generation as Mustache Pete's, adhered more strongly to the traditions of Italy and Sicily, preferring not to do business with Americans, for example. On the surface, the Castellamarese War was waged between supporters of boss Salvatore Maranzano and supporters of boss Giuseppe, Joe the Boss, Masseria. When Masseria was murdered in April of 1931, the war ended. Maranzano deemed himself the boss of bosses and designated certain men as the leaders of the other territories in New York. These factions later grew into the 5 families. Maranzano was murdered less than half a year later in a plot orchestrated by Salvatore Lucania, better known by his Americanized alias, Charles Lucky Luciano. After Maranzano's death, Luciano suggested convening the commission, a criminal board of directors composed of bosses from the 5 families plus the heads of other crime factions throughout the country, to mediate disputes and serve as judges and executioners. Luciano's structure built on the framework of organization that Maranzano had established. The formation of the commission strengthened the power of the 5 families by awarding them permanent seats on the board. One of Maranzano's appointments before his death was Joseph Bonanno, Joe Bananas, a young battle commander and enforcer who served under him. When Maranzano died, Bonanno took charge of the family that later came to bear his name. He remained in power for more than 30 years. Under his leadership, the family's criminal pursuits included profitable expansions into loan sharking, narcotics, prostitution, and gambling. His personal style was absent some of the extravagance and pomp and circumstance displayed by some of the other bosses of this era. Joseph Pistone, alias Donnie Brasco, was an undercover FBI agent tasked with infiltrating the Bonanno family. After months of planning, in September 1976, Pistone started his undercover operation, an operation that was initially intended to last for around 6 months, but which turned into several years. Pistone first spent 6 months in the Colombo family before he shifted to the Bonanno family by developing a relationship with Anthony Mira. When Mira was sent to prison, Pistone was tutored in the ways of the mafia by Bonanno soldier Benjamin Lefty Ruggiero, whose captain was Mike Mimi Sabella. After the murder of Galante, Pistone reported to Captain Dominic Sonny Black Napolitano. Following the Galante hit, Massino began jockeying for power with Napolitano. Both men were themselves threatened by another faction led by capos Alphonse Sonny Red and Delicato, Dominic Big Trin Trincera, and Philip Giacone. The commission initially tried to maintain neutrality, but in 1981, Massino got word from his informants that the 3 capos were stocking up on automatic weapons and planning to kill the Rastelli loyalists within the Bonanno family to take complete control. Massino turned to Colombo crime family boss Carmine Persico and Gambino boss Paul Castellano for advice. They told him to act immediately. Massino, Napolitano, and Gerlando Ciascia, a Sicilian-born capo linked to the Montreal Rizzuto crime family, arranged a meeting at a Brooklyn social club with the 3 capos for May 5, 1981. They had 4 gunmen, including Vitale and Bonanno-affiliated Montreal boss Vito Rizzuto, hiding in a closet to ambush them. When Trincera, Giacone, and Delicato arrived with Frank Curly Lino to meet Massino, they were shot to death, with Massino himself stopping Delicato from escaping. Lino escaped unscathed by running out the door. The hit further improved Massino's prestige, but was marred by both Leno's escape and the discovery of Delicato's body on May 28. Massino quickly won Lino over to his side, but Indelicato's son, Anthony Bruno Indelicato, vowed revenge. Napolitano assigned the associate he knew as Donnie Brasco, whom he hoped to make a made man, to kill Indelicato. However, Brasco's operation was ended on July 26, 1981. Pistone's undercover work led to over 200 indictments and over 100 convictions of mafia members. On August 17, 1981, Napolitano was shot and killed in a basement by Ronald Filocomo and Lino as punishment for admitting Pistone into his crew. On August 29, 1981, the FBI intercepted and arrested Ruggiero. Ruggiero received 15 years under the RICO Act. In February 1982, Anthony Mira, the man who had brought Pistone to the family, was also killed. In 1985, Rastelli was indicted along with other Cosa Nostra leaders in the Mafia Commission trial. However, when Rastelli was indicted on separate labor racketeering charges, prosecutors decided to remove him from the Commission trial. Having previously lost their seat on the Commission due to the Brasco infiltration, the Bonanno family suffered less exposure than the other families in this case. The family managed to avoid being ensnared by the FBI until 2000, when a pair of forensic accountants who normally worked on financial fraud cases discovered that Barry Weinberg, a businessman who had partnered with Capo Richard Canarella in several parking lots, had failed to report millions of dollars worth of income over a decade. Told he faced a long prison term unless he wore a wire and incriminated his Bonanno partners, Weinberg agreed to cooperate. One of Weinberg's other partners, Agostino Scazzari, also agreed to cooperate. Between them, Weinberg and Scazzari captured hundreds of incriminating statements from Cantarella and his crew. In October 2002, armed with this evidence, the government won a 24-count RICO indictment against 21 Bonanno soldiers and associates. The biggest names on the indictment were acting underboss Cantarella and Capo Frank Cappa, already serving time for fraud. Cappa agreed to turn informer, rather than face the prospect of an additional conviction that would effectively send him to prison for life. He was the first made man in the Bonanno family's history to turn informer. He was followed shortly afterward by acting underboss Cantarella, a participant in the Mira murder, who was facing racketeering and murder charges, and whom Cappa had implicated in the Perino murder along with Vitali. A third, Joseph D'Amico, subsequently turned state's evidence with the knowledge that Cantarella could implicate him in murder as well. All of these defections left Massino, at last, vulnerable to serious charges. On January 9, 2003, Massino was arrested and indicted, alongside Vitali, Frank Lino and Capo Daniel Mangeli, in a comprehensive racketeering indictment. The charges against Massino himself included ordering the 1981 murder of Napolitano. Massino was denied bail, and Vincent Basciano took over as acting boss in his absence. Massino hired David Breitbart, an attorney he had originally wanted to represent him in his 1987 trial, for his defense. As of 2023, Michael Mancuso remains the official boss of the Bonanno family. On March 9, 2022, boss Michael Mancuso was arrested and is under investigation for violating the terms of his supervised release by associating with members of organized crime.